Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Flourish FM, a podcast for a good life. Our guest today is Dr. Ethan Kross. Ethan is one of the world's leading experts on emotion regulation. He's an award-winning professor in the University of Michigan's top-ranked psychology department and its Ross School of Business, and he's the director of the Emotion and Self-Control Laboratory, where he studies how the conversations people have with themselves shape their health, performance, decisions, and relationships. Ethan is the two-time national best-selling author of Chatter, The Voice in Our Head, Why It Matters, and How to Harness It, and Shift, Managing Your Emotions So They Don't Manage You. Chatter became an international bestseller, translated into over 40 languages, and was chosen as one of the best new books of the year by The Washington Post, CNN, and USA Today. Shift was named a Best Book of the Year by Publishers Weekly. Ethan has participated in policy discussions at the White House, spoken at TED and South by Southwest, and consulted with some of the world's top executives and organizations. His research has been published in leading academic journals and has featured in major media outlets, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the New Yorker, and the BBC. He's been interviewed on CBS Evening News, Good Morning America, and NPR's Morning Edition. This is a fascinating conversation. We talk about both of Ethan's books, Shift and Chatter. We talk about what emotions are and how Ethan's story about how he went into doing research on emotion regulation. He goes into his life story about how it led to him becoming fascinated with what emotions are and how he can better manage them. He talks about a three-stage process about how we can learn to manage our emotions more effectively and outlines a toolkit for some of the most effective ways we can manage our emotions and goes through some of the most effective tools his research has found for emotion management. He talks about what our inner voice is, which is the subject of his book Chatter, and how we can learn to understand our inner voice. He talks about how it's not always bad and how it can give us useful information and how emotions can give us useful information too. And one of the key messages to take away from this is that negative emotions and the voice in our head, which is going at an alarming rate, it's speaking often all the time, these are not causes to be concerned, rather they're useful piece of information that we can learn from as long as we learn to manage them well. And that's the topic of conversation, how to manage our emotional lives better, how to manage our inner voice better so we can flourish. And his research has shown that this can have a powerful impact on us living better lives. It's a fantastic conversation. We hope you love it as much as we did. This is the new science on how to manage your emotions with Dr. Ethan Kross. Ethan, how you doing?
I'm great, John. How are you? I think it's really late where you are right now. Is that true?
It's just gone 8:30 in the evening. That's all right. That's cool.
Okay, not too bad.
This is
great to be here with you.
Yeah, you too, mate. This is a great reason to stay up late in the evening for sure. Loved reading your books, Shift and Chatter, in preparation for this. Been awesome. Great work. Really looking forward to discussing them with you. So you are one of the world's leading experts on emotion regulation. And we'd love to dig into the details of this today and how it relates to the theme of this podcast, human flourishing. And you've dedicated your career to studying how we manage our emotions and our inner voice. What drew you to this field? Was there a moment or experience that made you realize how profoundly our emotional lives shape our lives in general?
Yeah. There were a couple of threads that pulled together to push me in this direction. One thread was my dad growing up, and I told this story in my first book, Chatter. He was an interesting, unconventional character. On the one hand, he fit the stereotype of a gruff New Yorker. So what do I mean by that? Big bushy mustache, disheveled hair, New York Yankees baseball cap. Did not censor his language on the road. Loved using his digit, the middle one, while driving. If you know what I mean.
All the things, yeah.
Right. So there's that larger than life kind of abrasiveness to him. But then there was the side of him that loved reading Eastern philosophy and meditating in a lotus position twice a day and talking to me as a young kid about what he was reading about. And, when I was 3, 4, 5, when he would talk to me about the importance of what I call now introspection, what he called going inside, turning inward to make sense of your problems, come up with a solution and move on. That was terribly annoying, those conversations we had when I was young, but they hung with me throughout my childhood and adolescence. And, whenever I would get into a jam, I would always fall back on that early advice I received. I would turn inward, try to work through the problem, come up with a solution, and then keep going. So I was really good at not ever getting stuck on things. And then I got to college, took my first psych class, and halfway through the semester, we get to this topic of introspection, the scientific study of turning inward. And I think to myself, oh man, like I don't have to read this chapter. I've been doing this stuff my whole life. I've got this down. And first thing I learned in that class is that this is a superpower of the human mind. This is an unbelievable skill that we possess that allows us to innovate, create, flourish. But it is also one of our greatest vulnerabilities because we often try to work through problems. We get stuck, we ruminate, we worry, we perseverate. And so that was one light bulb that went off. And I thought to myself, wow, like what is going on? We have this equivalent of like nuclear energy in our head, this like amazing tool. It can help us, but it often derails us. And so that was one indicator that maybe I should, spend my life studying this stuff. And then in the background, while all this stuff was happening, I also had my grandparents' experience as two people who survived the Holocaust in, pretty spectacular ways. And so both my grandmother and grandfather lived in Eastern Poland when the Nazis invaded. Their families were slaughtered. They were homeless for several years, ultimately made it here and managed to, I'll use the word again, flourish in their lives over time. Uh, have kids, their kids had kids, ended up the American dream, like building a business and having a home and even a second home later in life. And, growing up, I would hear about the adversity they experience and then wonder, how was it possible for them to manage that distress, not only in ways that minimized it, but actually they flipped the switch and were able to have beautiful lives. And so those were a couple of the currents that pushed me, towards the direction of Skirmahorn Hall in Morningside Heights in New York, and they kind of kept me there even when graduate school got a little tough at times, and brought me to where I am today.
I'm super curious. What do you think got your dad interested in some of those other things? I really like this description of what sounds like a somewhat paradoxical guy. He sounds like an
Yeah.
interesting dude. And have you ever had that conversation with him? Sort of like what triggered those sorts of things? That sounds, relatively progressive for the time.
Well, he on the one hand, he grew up with the Beatles and the hippie movement and
Sure.
transcendental meditation was like super common. When I was around 5 years old, my birthday present was a mantra. I went to a TM studio in New York.
Love
I
it.
don't know if either of you, have
Okay.
either of you ever gone to one of those studios before?
No,
It's
no.
really interesting.
Yeah.
So you go in and there are just mattresses all over the floor. And I'm like, Dad, what's the deal with the mattresses? And he leans over and he's like, yogic flying. I'm like, what? Google it if you're curious, right? It's
Okay.
this,
I will. Yeah.
mythology. If you get really good, you can hop around.
Yeah.
Um, he was always, I think, drawn to the Eastern contemplative sciences, philosophies, probably in part to help him deal with adversity that he had experienced growing up. Um, in his childhood, and nothing that bordered on what my grandparents did, but he got thrown some curveballs as we all do, and I think had a little bit more
Sure.
difficulty hitting them. And so, I think that it's often the case that people seek out solutions,
Yeah.
to their problems, and then wanted to share his what was benefiting him with me. And so that's my sense.
Yeah. Sounds like a pretty
Awesome.
robust perspective in terms of an upbringing.
Yeah, it was pretty good. What it really lacked, though, was any kind of scientific rigor.
Sure.
And so the discourse was really around ideas that were being consumed, intuition, and and then learning out how to layer on science and like the scientific method. And I think of science as just it's this fantastic um, toolkit that we can use to test our ideas, right? To see what ideas should we have more confidence in than others, right? It's not the final arbiter because we don't always have methods to fully evaluate things, but it provides like a really great objective reality test of things. And I didn't have that growing up, and I really
Sure.
value that now. So
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Ethan. That's a great story. Let's go into like the most fundamental philosophical question, I guess, about all your work. What are emotions?
yeah, you'd think that that would be a really easy question to answer. So the first chapter of Shift deals with this question. I spent more time researching that chapter than any other. And mind you, I study this stuff. I'm an expert in this topic. And I find it remarkable on the one hand that everyone who is listening right now, and Nick and John, I've just met you, but I feel confident in saying that you've experienced emotions your whole life. When I say, when I talk about an emotional experience, you know exactly what I'm talking about to some degree. But when I ask people in classes and workshops and seminars, hey, give me a definition of an emotion, most people really, really struggle. Turns out scientists also struggle to some degree. So there are many different views on emotion. I'm sure you've had some people from different camps on your show over the years. And so to answer this question that you've just posed, I promise you I will answer it directly. The approach that I take is to focus on what's the consensual view of what an emotion is, according to science. And the consensus is that emotions are responses to events that happen to us. And those events can be things that happen in the world or events that we imagine in our mind that are meaningful. And if it's a meaningful event of some sort, it activates this response called an emotion. And an emotion is a coordinated response. It's a loosely coordinated response, meaning it activates different systems inside you. Your physiology is harnessed, your cognition is channeled, your expressive displays are often contoured in particular combinations, all with the express evolutionarily motivated goal of helping you manage the situation you are in. So you could think of emotions as kind of like having a software program loaded up to help you quickly deal with the situation at hand. So I'll give you a couple of concrete examples. Take anger, for example. We experience anger when we perceive there to be some violation of our sense of what is right and wrong. And there's an opportunity for you to do something about it. So when those conditions are met, this anger response gets triggered, and you are then motivated to often approach the situation, right? You also have a display on your face, like, give it to me, John and Nick, give it to me right now. Give me anger.
You want me to?
Oh, I
Just
have
angry.
resting angry face, if you can tell.
I was going to
already.
say,
I've been
Nick, you
accused
do.
of-
I didn't want to comment.
It's
Nick's
got
much
me
better
in
at
trouble
anger
in meetings. John's heard the
That's right.
story.
That's
Yeah, many
right.
in
Nick
meetings
can
has
just
got me in
snap
trouble.
on the anger much easier than me.
That's right.
I can
But
laugh on demand, but anger
Yeah.
on demand, that's a bit more difficult.
That's hard. That's hard. I could. It's pretty.
There you
It's
go.
not-
Yeah.
Terrifying,
Yeah.
mate.
Yeah.
Do that to my children. Watch
Yeah.
them run the other way. But look, this can be adaptive, right? So if my daughter, rides her bike without her helmet, we don't do that in our household, and that is dangerous. And so I have this anger response that motivates me to confront the situation, communicate that I'm not happy, to fix it, right? So you can think that's like an anger response. Notably, that's adaptive, right? So one of the myths I try to bust and shift is this notion that, you should strive to live a life free of negative emotion. Like really, really bad advice that
Yes.
we get, because number one, it's not possible. And I'm not in the business of giving people unattainable, impossible goals. Like you cannot, if you are a fully functioning normal human being, not experience any negative emotions. It's also not desirable. You wouldn't want to live life without the ability to experience anger, anxiety, sadness, shame, whatever, because those emotions serve a function. Most powerful example of that, pain. John and Nick, you guys like physical pain?
Enough to
Not
go
a
to the
trick
gym.
question.
Yeah.
Not usually,
And
but
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, you don't like it, right?
Yeah.
Most of us don't. Most of us strive to live lives free of physical pain. So, what would happen if you were actually successful? If you really literally took that to an extreme? We don't have to talk in hypothetical terms about what would happen. We know because there are
We know
kids that
that.
are born into the world every year incapable of experiencing physical pain due to a genetic anomaly. They die young
So dangerous.
because their
Yeah.
head gets caught in the stove and they don't pull it out.
yeah.
Right. So all of our negative emotions in the right proportions serve a function. So to back up, that's what emotions are. They're these beautiful gifts. They are the essence of our lives in many ways. Like we experience emotions throughout the day. According to one study, 90% of the time that we're awake, you are feeling something. You're probably feeling stuff when you're sleeping too. I know I do quite a
Hmm.
bit, right? And so we're emotional creatures. Those emotions are powerful tools, all of them, but they are imprecise tools. They are crude tools, and we never get a user's manual that teaches us how to wield them effectively. And that's both a ginormous problem as well as an opportunity. And that's
Hmm.
really what jazzes me up here on both the basic science side of things to research and discover new ways of helping people optimize these tools in their lives, as well as on the communication side, like how do we take what we're learning and get it out to give people that user's manual that we don't get.
I'm curious about the first couple pages of the user's manual, so to speak,
Yeah.
right? Like when you talk to people in groups or do trainings or coaching on emotions, like one of the things I think I've seen consistently, I'd be curious if your experience is similar, really, really low emotional lexicon, generally speaking, right? And then a lot of times, everything unpleasant is stress or
Yeah.
anxiety or just sort of like kind of labeled, right? Is that more or less what you see? And is the first step kind of what am I actually dealing with? Like, how do I separate some of these emotions and into specific words? Like you did a great job with anger. That's different than
Yeah.
frustration, which is different than disappointment,
Yeah.
right? Where do we begin?
Yeah, when I'm talking about emotions writ large, so maybe it'd be useful since we're talking about chatter and shift to also distinguish
Yeah,
those
Hmm.
features
great.
too.
Hmm.
So chatter is really about getting stuck in a negative thought spiral. So you got a problem, you're trying to work through it, but you don't make progress, and you just keep turning it over and over and over in your heads, ruminating, worrying,
Rumination. Yeah.
perseverating, and it's a giant problem. That's a pretty like focused psychological conundrum that people face. Shift was about the much broader terrain of like, welcome to your emotional life. Sometimes we don't want to get out of a negative thought spiral. Sometimes we just want to like understand how do you turn the volume on an experience up or down,
Hmm.
right? Or switch from one experience to another. And there are, slightly when I'm doing workshops on each of those, they take slightly different forms. So when I'm in the general emotional space, I usually start off by speaking to the critical importance of emotion regulation in our lives for thinking and performing optimally, for having great relationships, for being healthy and flourishing, right? The things we care about.
Hmm.
I like to give some examples that really highlight with pinpoint precision how negative emotions uh, can be actually useful for you. And in so doing, actually parcelate out like, here's what these different negative emotional experiences, here's when we have them, here's why we have them. And then I like to get tactical as quickly as possible, right? Because I do think that you don't need to know the difference between um, it can be helpful to draw a distinction between, fear and anxiety, but oftentimes people just want to have tools to deal with it.
Right.
Yeah. And,
Right.
and
Yep.
there are three steps. So step one, and I guys took this step for granted for the first half of my career. It was a major, we could frame it as a miss or a growth. Depends on how we look at it. Let's call it a growth. So step one is just believing that you are capable of managing your emotions. I just assumed for a long time.
Basic efficacy. Okay.
Of course, you can manage your emotions. How could you think otherwise? And then I actually tell this story in Shift. I came across a paper about it focused on adolescents' beliefs about emotion regulation. And about 40% of the sample in one study did not think they were capable of managing their emotions. This was
Wow.
mind-boggling to me. Like, on the one hand, here I am. I've started a lab, the Emotion and Self-Control Lab. I've essentially dedicated my professional life to helping people do this. And here I'm reading 40% of people don't even think it is possible, 40% of adolescents. Um, that's a huge problem because Nick, you mentioned before, and I could tell this from both of you. You guys are well put together. You guys go to the gym, you're exercising here, right? Like so like, why do you go to the gym? I go to the gym too. Guess what? I usually don't enjoy going to the gym.
Right.
It's painful. I do it because I want to live a long life. I don't want to have back pain, all these other things. But I genuinely believe that going to the gym is going to help me be healthier, more fit. If I didn't think it were possible to get more fit, I would not take the time out of my busy day to go. I would not pay
Of
the
course.
money, and I would not endure the pain. So step one is I like to really, really hammer home just how critical it is to believe. And I give people examples to demonstrate how it's actually possible to make everyone happy here, in the sense that when people say I can't control their emotions, there's some truth to that, right? It really depends on what part of the emotional experience you're talking about. So,
Sure.
all right, the last 2 weeks, have you guys experienced a thought stream through your head that just kind of popped up, didn't make you feel great? You probably wouldn't want to share it with someone else. Is that
Of course.
fair to say you've had a thought like
course.
that?
Of course.
Right? Have you experienced a thought like that on our call today so far?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not
Don't
yet.
answer that question. Don't answer that one.
Yeah.
So this is a universal, right? Intrusive thoughts, and if those of you who are listening are like trying to wrap your head, what would that be like? Just imagine, like, have you ever bumped into someone kind of stinky and automatically felt something, or on the flip side, walked past someone who smelled great and felt something, or saw someone who was really attractive and felt something, or just had a random thought pop into your head that caused you to be happy or maybe really sad. Lots of things happen in our brains, and we have some sense why. Boom, automatically outside of us, we do not have control over those mental experiences. But once those thoughts are activated, then there are many things that we can do to influence their course, their trajectory. So I walk people through, like, there are parts of your emotional life that you can't control. And by the way, if you can't control it, don't feel bad about it. Before I thought all of this through, I used to feel kind of bad when I would have a kind of dark or unflattering thought about something. Now I'm like, all right, just the way my brain works, just kind of put stuff up there every now and again. I don't have to attach to it. But once it's engaged, are things you can do. So that's step one. Step two, now that you believe going to the gym can get you fitter, we take you to the emotion regulation gym. Now you show up, I've got to teach you how to use every one of these machines. I got to teach you how to use these machines because you haven't encountered them before. You're not going to necessarily going to know how to use all of them. It's possible, if you try to use them without direction, you'll use them in the wrong way and hurt yourself. And I also need to teach you about how all of these machines work, because we know that different exercises and different combinations of exercises work for different people depending on what their goals are. So the 3 or 4 exercises, emotion regulation exercises that work for you, Nick, probably going to be different from the 5 or 6
Sure.
that work for John, and the 6 or 7 that work for me. So then I bring them through a bunch of those tools, and then at the end, I try to give them a framework that enhances the likelihood that they actually follow through on their plans to, implement this emotion regulation routine, as opposed to like try it 3 times and then never do it again. And so trying to overcome what we call the New Year's resolution dilemma, where you say, I'm going to lose 10 pounds in the next 6 weeks. And you go to the gym for the first 3 days. And then the next thing you know, you're having your scone and biscotti together, double fisting, every 3 hours, and you're in trouble. I was trying to like bring in both sides of the pond there with the two of you. I don't know if I did that very well.
You
but
did. I mean, must be watching me have breakfast, I think. So it sounds like the daily occurrence.
It's a nice
Yes.
combination for sure.
Yes.
I'll have to try that on a cheat day.
Yes.
Hi, friends. Nick here with just a brief interlude to share with you an update on one of our newest partnerships with the Antifragile Academy. Throughout John and I's conversations with many, if not most, of our guests, one thing has been made really clear. In order for people to flourish, thrive, experience the good life, they need to develop the capacity to not only navigate and endure, but ideally grow from the bad, grow from unpleasant experiences. That's why we're thrilled to be partnering with our newest sponsor, the Antifragile Academy, an organization that I co-founded with Dr. Adam Wright, Director of Mental Performance for the Washington Nationals. At the Antifragile Academy, we work with adolescent athletes, executives, and educators to help them understand some of the science, not just of optimal performance, but of well-being and anti-fragility. The ability not only to endure and bounce back from unpleasantness, but to actually come back stronger, to grow from it. Between Adam and I, we've worked with Fortune 100 companies, Inc. 300 executives, Division I programs, and elite professional athletes and Olympians from all over the world. To find out more about how you can leverage anti-fragility training, check out our website at theantifragileacademy.com.
Let's talk about these machines for step 2, all the machines in this functional gym. It sounds like there's a lot of them, and you do talk about a toolkit of exercises, of tools we can use to manage our emotions better. We can't expect you to go through all of them now, right? But what are some of the key tools or machines in that gym that people should most focus on learning to better regulate their emotions?
Yeah, so can't emphasize enough that there are no one-size-fits-all solutions. We did these studies during the COVID pandemic where we wanted to see, look, everyone's dealing with the same basic stressor right now, COVID anxiety. What are the tools that are moving the needle on people's anxiety from one day to the next? We asked people to kind of every day for a couple of weeks, rate how you're feeling, how anxious you are, and indicate which of 18 different tools you used. What we saw was remarkable variability. On average, people use between 3 and 4 different tools each day, and the tools that worked for someone on one day were different from the tools that worked for them on another day. So really need to know the terrain. Let me give you a couple of just highlights here. In Shift, I break these tools down into internal shifters and external shifters.
Right.
What's a shifter? It's a tool. What does a tool do? It helps you turn the volume on your emotions up or down. It can help you shorten or lengthen how long an episode lasts, or it can help you shift from one state, like anger, to another, like joy. Sensory shifters are one of my favorite. These do not get enough attention in the scientific literature. What do I mean by sensory shifters? I mean sight, sound, touch, smell. These are fundamentally emotion regulatory experiences. So I will often say to a group, I'm going to manipulate how all of you feel in a matter of seconds. Manipulate sounds kind of creepy, but maybe influence, right? And they look at me and like, what do you do? What? Come on. You're not going to impact how I feel right now. I press a button and, on the speakers, Journey's Don't Stop Believin' starts to play. And, within
In
a matter
Michigan,
of
it's
seconds,
over.
It's over. There is
It's
a
over.
Detroit.
Born and raised in South Detroit, it's done.
It's done. You know it, right?
Yeah.
And like 95% of the room is doing this. It's their eyes closed, and the others are just scowling, right? They hate this song. I didn't tell you what kind of emotion I was going to make you feel. I just said I'm going to make you feel something. Think about sound, music. I mean, John and Mick, do you listen to music?
Loads, yeah.
Why do you do it?
Love the way it makes me feel.
Yeah,
Boom.
vibes.
Right? Almost 100% of people when asked that question will answer it in that way. I listen to music because I like the way it makes me feel. Fundamentally, this is an emotion regulatory activity. Yet, if you then look, as we have done in our research, like when you're struggling with anxiety, anger, depression, or sadness, what do you do? Only between 10 and 30% avail themselves of this very, very easy to implement tool that shifts your emotion within a matter of seconds. Not only do people not often avail themselves of it, sometimes they do, but in a direction that is counterproductive. So what I mean by that is you're feeling kind of glum, you want to feel better, but rather than listening to Journey's Don't Stop Believin', greatest pump up song of all time, you listen to Chicago or Adele, it just kind of sinks you down deeper. Have you ever had that experience? You just like listen, you're sad and you listen to a sad song. And so there's a reason for that too, but the point here is it's a tool. And if you know how to use it, it can help you. All of our senses work this way. Scent, hotels pump scents throughout their lobbies to make you feel good in the presence of those establishments. You guys ever do this wacky thing called go out to eat? You ever do that? Yeah. Why did we spend so much? It's gotta be, I've never like looked at the industry. It's gotta be a multi-trillion-dollar industry, the food industry. Think about the amount of money we spend. We're not doing this simply for nutrients. We could have IVs attached to us in a matrix-like manner, if you know that movie reference, right? Like there are ways to nourish people that don't require $15 salads and whatnot. We spend money on food because we like the way it makes us feel. It's an emotional experience. Touch. I don't have to like labor on affectionate touch, right? Like also emotional. So all of your senses are tools that you can harness. Those are probably the easiest way to get very quick shifts in your emotion. Um, the shifts are often short lived, but sometimes a little nudge in a particular direction can be helpful for opening you up to another set of tools. Attention is another category. Attention often gets a bad rap, and I'm curious if you guys have heard this. We often hear that we should never avoid our emotions, right? Our negative emotions, like roll up your sleeves, get in there, get to the bottom of it. Turns out that's not exactly true. What we've learned is that being strategic with your attention is usually the most important quality to harnessing that capability. So attention is like your spotlight, your mental spotlight, and what you look at, where you shine that spotlight impacts the information that comes in. You ever get Nick, do you guys email each other?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten like a really annoying email from the other person? Like it just kind of irritated you?
Nick's probably got more from me than I've got from him for sure.
I don't know about
Okay,
that.
so
But,
all right. All right. Well, we're going to start with Nick since John was quicker on the draw there. So Nick, let me ask you, like, okay, you got two choices. John sends you a real zinger. It just pisses you off. Do you respond right away? Or you maybe, take a couple hours before you react.
So for my experience, and John has a similar history. I don't know if you function the same way, John, but I come from coaching, I come from education, I come from working with a lot of kids and a lot of parents. And early on, I learned a 24-hour rule, right? And it's exactly what you said. I am strategically avoiding the emotionality of it so that I chill the F out and respond in a way that feels more level-headed, values aligned, right? Less full of the adrenaline or cortisol or whatever it is at that time, right? And likewise, sometimes if I find myself overly excited or overly optimistic, I'll try to scale that back a little bit too before I make a decision. So,
yeah. And so this is a form of strategic avoidance, right? You are avoiding the issue. And while you're doing that, you're letting what we metaphorically refer to as our psychological immune system operate. And so a key element of that immune system is time. Here's what we know about emotions. This is a truism. The vast majority of our emotional experiences, there's a specific time course. Like you're living life, an emotion is triggered, and then as time goes on, it eventually, I'm out of the frame now, but it fades, right? Like time does temper reactions. So you give it some time, you then jump in, you're a lot more objective, a lot more goal aligned in how you respond. That is an example of the power of strategic avoidance.
Mm.
So you want to be skilled at harnessing that spotlight. Sometimes you do want to get to the bottom of it, expose yourself to something that's really bothering you. So it starts to have its emotional impact. You quote unquote habituate to it. But you want to figure out how to really um, be skillful in how you shine that spotlight. And usually simple rules like always focus on the problem or never don't work out very well for people. Looked like you wanted to say something.
It seems like there's a desired nimbleness, right? And we do similar framing for context. I do a little research on what we call anti-fragility, but it's engaging with unpleasant stuff on purpose, right?
Yeah,
For
sure.
particular outcomes. And it sounds like you're saying, there are probably skills for avoiding unpleasant experiences that are actually harmful. There's some skills for engaging in unpleasant experiences that have some utility. There's also some skills for probably engaging in nourishing stuff and avoiding things that feel good but are bad for us, right? And
Yep.
I'm curious, right, that there's almost those four quadrants. Do you find people struggle with any of those four quadrants the most, right? Or maybe
I
overly invested in some?
I find that so big picture, there can be value in spending time in each of those different
Yeah,
quadrants,
I would
depending
think
on what
so.
the goals are. The mythology in this space, we love, for really good reason, simple prescriptions,
Yeah,
right? So just avoid it, just approach.
right.
Turns out, like, guess what? Life's not so simple.
Yeah,
And I
let
think
them.
it's kind of beautiful that we have um this capacity to like being able to use that term with our attention. But again, whoever taught you when
Right.
to approach, when to avoid, when to go back and forth. So in the book, I try to break it down. Look, some people, they're chronic approachers. They cannot help themselves. Like the tempting email comes in, all right, I'm not going to respond, and then they're
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
shouldn't have
yep,
sent that.
Yeah.
Then you got the chronic avoiders. I mean, you can't for the life of them get those people to engage with the problem. And sometimes they'll go to like substances to really blunt the emotions, and like that does not work out. There's tombs of evidence showing that chronic avoidance is really bad. Then you have people who like approach and avoid, try to go back and forth, but they don't do it skillfully. So they try to get away from the problem to let things cool down, but they just get sucked back in because they're surrounding themselves with cues that trigger the thoughts. And so you want to really break it down and think about, well, okay, is there value right now in approaching or avoiding? And then once you engage in either of those directions of how to divert your attention, then you should like take stock of how is that working for you. For example, there have been times where I've tried, all right, let me just not think about this for a bit and like let my immune system come down. But it has been such a hot, tempting issue. I can't distract. Even when I'm in a positive
yeah,
distractor, just the thoughts keep coming back. So when that happens, I've got two choices. Number one, I can deal with the situation or try to, I can approach it, or I can shift to another set of skills, my perspective shifters. So we talked about sensory, we talked about attention. Perspective shifters, here the issue is you got a problem right in front of you. It's igniting an emotional response. We have this unbelievable ability to change the way we think about that situation. We can change our perspective on it, which can often be really, really helpful for resolving emotional distress. Not only resolving emotional distress, mind you, also transforming ordinary experiences in ways that, propel positive experiences in your life too.
Mhm.
Now, the issue with this set of tools, I think the title of the chapter in the book sums it up. Easier bleeping said than done, right? We often hear, just think differently about it. Come on, Nick. Just focus on the bright side, right? Like easier often said than done. And so what's cool here is we've discovered tools that do make it easier for you to reframe your situation, because sometimes it can be hard to do that. And one common denominator here is we find that being able to step back and adopt a more detached or distanced perspective, becoming a fly on the wall to your own experience, thinking about your problems like they're happening to someone else, writing about your problems like you're writing about another person. Those are all distancing tools that can help people gain a little bit more objectivity when they're struggling in ways that really help them. So those are the internal shifters: sensation, attention, perspective. And those are tools you carry with you wherever you go. But then you can get outside those tools. And I'm not going to go through each one of those buckets
Sure.
on their own, because I want to throw it back to you guys. But just so folks know, you've got other people. Other people can be a
Right.
liability or a tremendous asset. You both are coaches. You are emotion regulation, shifting advisors to others, right? And there's a really, really good reason why there is your profession, because other people can be unbelievably powerful. Then there's also like our physical environments. Physical environments, like there are tools all around us that can shape our emotional experience, but we're not often mindful of how to architect those surroundings or visit different areas that have the opportunity to replenish us. And then there's the cultures that we are a part of, the organizations and the cultures that characterize them, the groups and societies, and those shape our experiences as well. So those are the kind of outside in
Yeah.
shifters.
So you mentioned a bunch of great tools there. Thank you so much, but also limits to certain tools. And it was quite taken in your book in Shift about the limits you describe, or if like the warning signs you describe for using introspection and venting, right?
Yeah.
So there's a degree to which these can be healthy ways to process difficult emotions, but there's ways in which they're not. And your research has challenged this. Can you talk to us about kind of when it's good to introspect and when it isn't good to introspect? Same with venting, how we navigate those tools.
Yeah. So, venting can be good for strengthening the bonds between people. It's good to know that there are other people out there feel the same way. They're pissed off about the same things that I'm pissed off about. The problem is if all you do is vent about a problem, you feel good about your relationship with the person you're venting to or with, but you don't deal with the problem because you're just kind of working yourself up. So you often see people who vent with one another, they start co-ruminating. They just kind of like egg each other on. And, progressively you can see like the artery in their neck or the vein beginning to like become more visible. They're just working themselves up. So that tends to not be a great solution for problems. The better way to talk about problems is to find someone who does two things. Number one, they do let you express your emotions. It's important to get it out, but at some point they nudge you to start looking at that bigger picture, to reframe it. All right, John, I got it. He's got some issues, like clearly, but how are we going to deal with this? Or like you dealt with this issue with Nick last year and as well the year before, if I might remind you, but you had a great solution. So what did you do? Or, what would you do if I was in this situation with Nick? What would you tell me? So there are lots of ways to help the person reframe, but that's the cheat sheet here. Step one, if I'm the advisor, empathize, listen, learn, validate. Step two, work with the person to reframe. And the bigger the problem, and that could be driven by the nature of the situation or the individual's propensity to make it big. Usually you got to spend a little bit more time in that first stage before people are ready to go into the second. But that's a really valuable roadmap. Like I really value that little nugget of science. That has helped me immensely, both in my own personal life when I'm trying to get support from others, but also when other people come to me. I've got a guide. So, that's venting. With introspection, the problem is the intuition is right. You've got a problem. You want to try to get to the bottom. You want to problem solve. But it's so emotional. You get zoomed in so narrowly, you lose perspective and then you just start ruminating. So the key for introspecting more functionally, more adaptively, focus on the problem, but do it from a zoomed out perspective. Like take that step back. Try to think about, I often talk about distant self-talk. So use my name or the word you to refer to myself silently in my head. All right, Ethan, how should you manage this situation? I'm a really good coach to other people. Like I give great advice to others. I just don't take that advice myself often. When I use my name or the word you to coach myself through a problem, I'm using language to switch my perspective, to get me to think about myself like I were someone else. That makes it a lot easier to introspect more effectively. So that's one kind of tool that can aid introspection. Two other kind of low-hanging science fruit for people to consider are two forms of mental time travel. If you got an issue that's troubling you, think about how you're going to feel about it sometime in the future, tomorrow, next week, next year, 10 years from now. Earlier in this conversation, we talked about how as time goes on, the intensity of your emotions subside. You don't have to wait for that to happen. You can transport yourself into the future, and that highlights the fact that what you're going through is temporary, turns the volume on your chatter down. You could also go back in time, and that works a little bit differently. This is my ace in the hole. So if I'm really struggling with something, all right, let me program my mental time travel machine for 1941 Eastern Poland. Get out, spend some time with my grandparents. Don't spend a lot of time with them to go, whoa, what are you worried about, man? Notice, by the way, I just layered in distant self-talk with mental time travel.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going back. Ethan, what are you worried? Nazis were chasing them, and you're thinking about the meeting earlier today that was a little uncomfortable. Big perspective broadener. And I like to remind people, you don't need to have Holocaust surviving grandparents to benefit from that experience. We all have adversity that we've overcome. So those are a couple of ways to get around the pitfalls of the common traps of venting and rumination.
What about, you mentioned earlier kind of, validating or validation, right? And we're also talking about these tools for sort of like, psychological nimbleness, right? Or cognitive nimbleness and reframing and perspective shifting. And you've done such a nice job of bringing up the nuance or sort of like the light side and dark side of some of these skills. How do you help people think about running the risk of, on the one hand, is every emotion valid? And but on the other hand, if you're saying like, well, I'm going to question and I'm going to check to make sure my emotions are valid, you maybe run the risk of suppression in some cases as well, right? Is that, that kind of needle we're trying to thread here, if that makes sense? How do you help people think about that?
Well, I think when you're in the role of being a coach or a chatter or a shifting advisor, starting with validation is a great, safe place to start, because you are really just confirming a natural experience without judgment, and that can be really useful for building trust and connection between people. And when people are struggling, there's this beautiful research. I talked about it in both of my books because it's so, I think, spectacular. It's research on by Bernard Ramay, this Belgian psychologist, who just wanted to know, like, when you're upset, like, what do you do? Like, and he found you talk about it. And over the course of several decades, he tried to understand, oh, why do you talk about it? And does the way you talk about it matter? And what he found is when we're struggling, we have two goals. We have these social and relational goals, which means we just want to, like, we're a social species. We want to know that we're part of the community and clan and that we're not really strange and that our experiences are normal. And so when you're validating someone in a conversation and normalizing the experience, normalizing like anyone who experienced this would probably be a little upset if you interpreted it in that way. But notice what I did there, right? If you interpret it in that way. So it's saying that not everyone will respond this way. So that's step one. But step two is we also have these cognitive needs. We got to get on with our lives. So it's about strengthening the connections with others, but then also we got to satisfy, like, all right, this thing's bugging me. I got to nip it in the bud so I can move on.
Sure.
And a little validation, but it shouldn't just be about validation.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You want to get to the
Both
second
and.
part of it as well. Exactly.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome, Ethan. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. Loved your books, Shift and Shatter. Anything else you'd like to mention to our audience, where they can find you online, certain work of yours they can check out, your lab, for example, you mentioned?
Yeah, you could find me online. The email, the website address is going to be a little bit counterintuitive. You ready for it?
Go for it.
www.ethankross.com. So just my name, and tried to keep it simple. And there's links there to my lab, meet, all sorts of stuff that if you're interested in the space, check it out. And, thank you guys for having me on. Thank you for doing what you do, getting the science out there in the world. It's really important. And I'm grateful for it.
Appreciate that.
Thank you for doing what you do, Ethan. It's fantastic work. We could keep talking for hours. This has been fascinating. Thank you so much. We hope you've enjoyed watching or listening to this as much as we have. This has been the new science on how to manage your emotions with Dr. Ethan Kross.
Thanks so much for listening to Flourish FM. We hope you enjoyed the content. Please be sure to leave us a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to your podcast and on all major social media platforms.
And if you visit our website, flourishfmpodcast.com, you can sign up to our newsletter. We send out a weekly newsletter. First newsletter of every month, we share a long form blog, and every newsletter, every week, we share highlights from our previous episodes. Please hit subscribe on our website.